courses offered by the Council of Europe and in the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies in Germany. He began his diplomatic career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1994. He spent 1 year in the position of Deputy Director at Latvia's State Chancellery with responsibility for coordinating election integrity. He has served as Latvia's ambassador to Denmark, to the Czech Republic, and to Croatia. He has also held significant diplomatic postings at Latvia's embassies in the USA and Sweden. Since 2019, he has worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he was Director General for International Security and International Organizations, where he headed the Russia Division and the Security Policy Department. Kaspars Ozoliņš has served as an ambassador to Canada since February the 24th, 2022, and he is here with us today. Lūdzu.
Before we begin, we're going to show a very short video commemorating Latvijas dienu, Latvian Remembrance Day. And it's all footage from last year in Riga.
Dziedāsim tās dziesmas, kuras strēlnieki dziedāja, prātam, neaptverami grūtos un smagos laikos, apstākļos, kurus mēs nekad mūžā negribētu pieredzēt. Atcerēsimies strēlniekus, šis ir veltījums tieši viņiem, latviešu strēlniekiem.
Tumsa leju plaižas, dabas naudai atdodas. Mūsu mazais izlūk pulciņš, klus caur tumsu aizogas. Mūsu mazais izlūk pulciņš, klus caur tumsu aizogas. Baigs un draudošs klusums apkārt, nāve gaisos līdinās. Viņas klusi, saltā dvaša, dvešis grābas virs tālās. Viņas klusi, saltā dvaša, dvešis grābas virs tālās. Klusi ejam, melnā tumsā, nekas redzams, klausās auss. Galvā plāsim, tā kā šaubas, diez vai rītu redzēt ļaus. Galvā plāsim, tā kā šaubas, diez vai rītu redzēt ļaus. Klausīt sastīs, takus svilpies, tas pēc norunas. Esam klāt pie cēloņrātīm, priekšā vācu tranšējās. Esam klāt pie cēloņrātīm, priekšā vācu tranšējās. Noknišķ trātīs, veids kriešāri, veids tiek milzu darbs. Tomēr ienaidnieks mūs jūtis, atskan briesmu zīmās skarbs. Darboties sārožem dori, katras gaismas Rīgas iež, katrs karš jau užmetēji, neskaitāmas lodes iež. Katrs karš jau užmetēji, neskaitāmas lodes iež. Mūsu mazais izlūk pulciņš, klus caur tumsu aizogas. Vāci ilgi vēl šauj tumsā, nesen savās tranšējās. Vāci ilgi vēl šauj tumsā, nesen savās tranšējās.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. Paldies Toronto Latviešu pensionāru apvienībai. And I think this is very good opportunity for me to start my presentation on Riga jūgendstila or Art Nouveau architecture, transitioning from 11th of November, which is Latvijas diena or the day of the freedom fighters of Latvia. Indeed, 11th of November is a day when we celebrate the liberation of Riga from when our troops, together with other allies, defeated German and also Russian troops, and then started, let's say, full liberation of Latvian territory. So what is the lesson from that time, of course, is that we always have to stand together with our friends and allies. We have to build the friendships, partnerships, and we have to have a very good and strong allies. We didn't have allies before the beginning of the Second World War, and that ended fairly bad for many countries in between, let's say, Germany and Russia. And that is one of the lessons of our history. Nowadays, today, we have Canadian troops in Latvia, along with other 14 nations that are operating into multinational land brigade and trying to deter and defend eastern flank of NATO from whatever threats may arise. What you saw on the video, and what I saw on the video, actually, I paid attention to the buildings that were on the video, which was not very important part. But what did I notice is that on one of the buildings that was there on the video was the best-known modernist building in Riga, in Latvia, that was built in 70s, and that's Dailes Theatrs. So you noticed it. So that's modernism. What I'm talking today, it's about the beginning of the modern architecture styles, and it is the modernism in Europe mostly started, let's say, with the new trend in architecture, in art, in music, in decorative applied art, in textiles, furniture, you name it. And that was beginning of Art Nouveau in Europe. Why I want to speak about Riga? Because apparently that everyone goes to Riga, they are looking for those beautiful places and spots where they could make pictures of fantastic architecture that we have in my country, in capital of Riga, and it's not just us, it's not just the tourists. So in 1997, the Riga was inscribed on UNESCO World Heritage List as partly because of, or mostly because of the presence and represented, let's say, undercurrents of Jugendstila or Art Nouveau architecture in Riga. So I want to tell you a little bit more about that. And for that, I need to give you a little bit of context, what I started to do already. And I'll tell also about those, let's say, sub-styles that exist in Riga of the Jugendstila. So it's not just one style. And want also to tell a little bit about the sort of prerequisites or factors that were present there in Latvia that made Riga as a capital of Art Nouveau or Jugendstila architecture in the world. So we are talking basically about historically very short time period. So it's from 1899 when the, let's say, first building was built in Latvia, in Riga, in Jugendstila, and the period ended roughly about, it's very rough estimate, so it's about 1911, and then the newer styles sort of started to present themselves, or let's say further let's say expression of the modern architecture. So typically when we think about Art Nouveau or Jugendstila, we are thinking about expressive and saturated facades of the buildings that we find in many European cities and also in Riga. But that is, Jugendstila is much more than that. As I mentioned already, so those are the dates when Jugendstila started in Riga. Okay, it went forward, so I did too many clicks, so it's okay. Just a second, it has to be on now. So as we're going to the next slide, the next slide is on the origins of the Art Nouveau, and it's still okay. It will take time before I'll adjust to clicking this one. So I guess it stays with this one. So as I mentioned, so Art Nouveau finds expression in many ways, and it is characteristic all over Europe, but not only Europe. So it's also in Latin America. You can have in other parts of the world. Not so much actually in Canada. I've been going around in Canadian cities and trying to see and find, let's say, elements of Jugendstyle. Haven't found them a lot, but basically there is something in Ottawa as well. So the time period is roughly 10 years longer than in Latvia, so it's beginning of 1890 up to the same, let's say, 1910. So always the new styles come as a, let's say, reaction or against the previous styles. And what was this one? So you may have heard about in architecture about the historicism or eclecticism. So in Latvia, for instance, Academy of Art would be in Riga, Academy of Art would be one example of eclecticism. So my guess is that if you look at the Fairmont hotels all over Canada, those would be very good examples of historicism style, or that try to mimic or represent older styles, and it's not a novelty, it's not the style of that time. So 19th century in Europe was that period of those two historic styles, and when it started, let's say in Europe, in art schools, in architecture schools, you know, and when the new magazines were issued and new galleries were opened for the new style. So this is roughly about 1890. So architecture was not necessarily the very first one to start with. So it was in the art, textiles and applied arts. But if we talk about architecture, then the first buildings actually appear in Brussels, in Belgium capital, and this is one of the art that should be representative. But it doesn't. But the interior or the spatial outlay or the plan of the building doesn't sort of is not connected to the facade. What does it mean? One of the good examples is typically when you see in the older buildings, you have, let's say, nicely, rhythmically placed windows over the facade, and it may happen that basically you may have the floors of one. Let's say one floor is, let's say, somewhere in the middle of the window. One reason for that, it's supposed to look nice, and this is something that the modern art is changing, and you see it's fairly well in this building. So you have the windows, so it's like the dwelling level, I guess, could be those windows, and this is apparently the staircase. And they are not aligned. They are not in the same rhythmical line. So this is, let's say, new modern architecture. So these windows in the staircases, they follow the function. So as you go up the stairs, if you turn up, sort of go up one flight, so you're supposed to have a window there, not on the floor or not, let's say, top of the ceiling. So this is, let's say, one let's say good example, and we'll see it also in Riga as well. And this is another building, one of the first, Victor Horta Hotel Tussel in Brussels, built in a narrow space, but that house is basically built around that staircase. So in this staircase, you see the new materials. The first thing, lots of use of metal, and also the forms. They are like very expressive. And from these forms and also, let's say, paintings on the walls, they resemble whiplash. So this is why they sometimes call it as a whiplash style as well, at least in Belgium. Well, this is about the origins of the architecture in Europe. If we go to Latvia, so we are a couple of years behind probably, and this is first Jugendstyle building in Riga. in Old Town, of course, so that's nowadays Street 7. And it is built 1899. And here you little bit see the mix between the old and new architecture. You would still, by the presentation of the window, you would understand that this is not the living room. It's most likely either restaurant or store, shop, and that needs to sort of be translated from inside to the outside, so that the people on the street would be able to read it. So what is, of course, here, it's still a little bit of the old ways how you build the building, right? So you would still have the floor levels seen there, and of course the decoration that is different. Facades are differently decorated than it was in the previous ways, but we'll see it further down. So what we don't see it here, so the picture is fairly old, but there are, let's say, metallic let's say, I'll call them rods right now, you know, that are sort of aesthetically presented with the Jugendstyle, let's say, decoration, but also they have a function. The function of when the snow goes down and ice goes down, so it's not supposed to come down in the big sheets on the heads of the bypassers. So there is that functionalism that is also presented in a very aesthetic way. We don't see it on this picture, but that's just trying to at least to tell you what's not there, but you know what it is. You know how nowadays the roofs are made. They have to have also, let's say, some function to it. So Max Czerwiński is the Polish-born architect, and he studied in Germany, in Stuttgart, but it's the beginning of Jugendstyle. So we'll see later. So there are lots of Latvian architects. So why I'm giving his name also, because he actually introduced broader public in Latvia to the Jugendstyle through the next thing that happened in Riga, Industry and Crafts Exhibition in Riga 1901. So this is when the citizenry decided that Riga should celebrate 700 years since the foundation. It's 1901, and one way to do it is to do the big Industry and Crafts Exhibition. So Esplanade is the, okay, so I have to ask actually, how many of you have not been to Riga? Okay, I would say 100%, or this is the question wrongly asked, so who has been to Riga? Okay, thank you very much. So I have some names of the streets so that you can recognize, and this Industry and Crafts Exhibition was in Esplanade. So Esplanade is the area behind the where the Orthodox Russian cathedral stands. So all of that park was just a sandy field, and that was built with about 40 pavilions for the exhibition. And that, of course, meant that had to be done through the tendering. And Max Czerwiński, who built the first house, he won actually the tender, and he was sort of then tasked to design the pavilions for that industry. And the pavilions that he built, so this is the main entrance and the restaurant, it's very good presentation of the Jugendstyle architecture as it was known at that time in Europe, with the motives that were familiar to that style. So it was very popular event in Riga. So it ran for 3 months, and it was attended by 800,000 people out of 2 million people. So I guess lots and lots of, let's say, people in Latvia were exposed to the new style. Now I will jump back and forth a little bit, 2 slides, and I want to tell you sort of the factors that were conducive for Art Nouveau in Riga. You know, there is always story behind the story. So why in Riga, and what were the factors? So the first thing Riga was very, very rapidly growing at the turn of the century, 19th and 20th century. So we have a first census in Russia conducted in 1897. And at that time, Riga was inhabited by 282,000 people. By 1913, Riga was 580,000 people already. So imagine, so it's a little bit over than in 1 decade, then the size of the city almost doubled. So it's 300,000 extra people. So they need to have a place to live, right? So the other thing, of course, that was at that time, it was like economic boom, especially after 1905, 1907, 8, until the First World War. That was really, the economy was booming in Latvia, and that was also represented in the construction as well. So we have one credit union here down in the hall. It's not super popular thing right now. We rely on the foreign banks. In that time, for the population who came in Riga, and guess who were the people who were coming to Riga? Those were peasants who were liberated from serfdom in 1861, and the descendants of the first free peasants who had an extra money. So it was basically Riga, who was, let's say, medieval, less than 100,000, let's say, 50 years ago, suddenly grew, let's say, by 10 times, almost 10 times. And all of them who came in were Latvians. So at that time, they didn't have a foreign banks. They had the local banks in Riga, but they were not super happy to give loans to those Latvians who came to Riga. So what happened? Actually, lots of credit unions sprung up in Latvia. I think first Latvian credit union was 1882. By 1913, there were 22 Latvian credit unions. So, and they were fairly easily giving out money, loans to buy a land, to build a house. Then it was, of course, mortgage was issued later after and repaid back to the credit unions. But initially, the initial capital came from the Latvian credit unions, and 85% of the money that was borrowed from the credit unions went into the construction. So the other thing I need to mention is that in 1861, I guess, let's say the predecessor of Riga Technical University, or Riga Polytechnicum, was created, and in 1869 they established the Faculty of Architecture. So what does it mean? That, of course, those Latvians who came to Riga from the countryside, they had their money, they were able to study in the university, and there was a huge number of Latvian architects who graduated from that school. So meaning that there were already people, who were thinking of translating their, let's say, experience, their tradition, their culture into language of architecture as well. So now I have to go back. So now we are speaking about the 3 trends of jūgendstila architecture in Riga. So in Riga, or in most of the Europe, in most of the world, so the most typical one is what you call eclectically decorative Art Nouveau. So initially I mentioned that there are, let's say, architectural styles, the old traditional one, where the interior of the building is detached from the facade. So the very beginning of the Art Nouveau is roughly the same thing. So what changed? The construction itself, the building was done in an old way. So what was new? The decoration, the outside, the facades were decorated in different ways. And this is what you see. So it's probably not very big. I'm not quite sure if this is the staircase, but this is the door, and somewhere is the staircase. Probably to the back of the house, right? But at that time, you may easily have a Jugendstyle building that still would not sort of have matched together, let's say, the spatial planning and of the building itself with the facade. So what we know about is that this is, we are looking at the very expressive masks, the floral elements. I don't see it myself. Is it floral? I'll sell it to you as a floral element. Probably we'll see it more on other pictures. Yeah, so this is essentially how the eclectical Jugendstil sort of introduced itself. We in Latvia are not super or particularly, let's say, proud or not trying to sell this, let's say, trend or sub-trend of the Jugendstil for one reason, because this is not inherent to Latvia. This is not something that's done so much by the Latvian architects, and it's not in a such scale like probably in other places. So, but this is anyway. So the most prolific architect was Michael Eisenstein, and most known, the best known street probably. This is from old postcards, so this is why the quality is better than probably today's sometimes when people make their from their phones. So it's this is Alberta Street, how it looked in 1910, I guess, on a postcard. So you won't have too many streets, too many houses in Riga in eclectical Jugendstil or Art Nouveau, but the Alberta Street is the very, very best expression or very best example of that one. So these are the places that typically tourists are visiting, and this is why this presentation is not about eclectical Jugendstil so much. And this is the most photographed house in Riga, which is on Elizabeth Ciela 10B, and here you see the characterization with the animal heads and expressive faces, prolonged figures. There are some, is it like floral? Yeah, it's from fauna elements, like tree-like, but this is how the Jugendstil is supposedly have to look like. So to sum this up, so this is the innovation in this decorative eclectical Jugendstil was only decorative motifs. So it's curvilinear, tense lines and geometrical figures, floral ornaments, masks, and it's very big or very, let's say, very big saturation of the ornament of the on the facades. So probably architects. This is one of the houses in Old Town, again, Smilšiela 2. And I know that among the architects, I heard it for the first time from architect Jānis Dripe, who was my first boss when I was a junior diplomat. So my first posting was Sweden, and architect Jānis Dripe was my first ambassador. So I learned from him that this lady is Miss Stone Riga. So this is just like a fun fact. But when you're next time in Riga, you might be sort of interested to visit that place. So for us, we of course like very often it takes time before you sort of start to realize what it is that you have actually and be very proud and happy about it. So basically, this is I'm putting this building into this presentation because this was the first building that was renovated in early 80s by the Polish restaurators still during the Soviet times. So at that time, of course, during the Soviet times, the Jugendstil didn't look so colorful and beautiful as you can see it today and nowadays, but this was the first one that really brought a crowd. So this is also a very good example of early styles of Jugendstil. So another thing I probably need to mention, what is so special, not like so special. At the very beginning, I mentioned that it's all over art form. It was like interiors, applied art, jewelry, textiles, whatever. So in what ways Riga stands out, and it's a little bit of a sad story. is because of the two world wars and because of the Soviet times and destruction and everything, out of all the richness of Jugendstil that you can find, we have basically only architecture, we have only buildings. The rest is either looted, burned down during the Soviet times, taken away, or something like that. So when you go to antique shops in Riga, you can buy nothing that originates from Riga. So it's all brought from Europe, all over Europe. When I was ambassador to Czech Republic, Czechs didn't have a war in Czechia, not active war in Czech Republic, neither during the First World War, neither the Second World War. So there, if you go to the antique shops, they are full with whatever kind of applied art in a Jugendstil. So, and that is one thing. So we typically show buildings, but we don't have much to show for the interiors or furniture or other things. So, and this is one of the examples where the interior staircase is very well renovated, and that's again on the same Alberta Street. And you know that at the end of the Alberta Street, so there is a Jugendstil art, no, not the art, Jugendstil center. It's called center, but basically it is fully furnished apartment in Jugendstil. So this is really, you can go in and appreciate how the Jugendstil apartment with all of the interiors and furniture and appliances, you know, that are in here and there. So you can see how does it look like. But because of the wars, because of the Soviet period, so this is basically the only thing where you can see the Jugendstil in its entirety. Now the second style, the second sub trend of the Jugendstil is what is called perpendicular Art Nouveau, or in Latvian that would be perpendikulārais vai stateniskais Jugendstils. And that is what we probably are more proud because this is the most characteristic trend in Riga among the Art Nouveau buildings, and this is so let's say sub-style that developed in Riga, in Latvia, independently from other, let's say, Jugendstil centers or places in the world. And buildings we have out of the Jugendstil buildings, probably 1/3 of the buildings would be in this perpendicular Art Nouveau style. So which it became popular in 1906. And well, this is on the same Alberta Street, but this is very good example of the buildings where vertical elements of the facade, like these ones here, that determines the entire composition of the an artistic image of the building. So typically in this style, so you have very strongly articulated bay windows and relief, protruding bands rising several story high. The same thing here. And this is another building where you can very easily tell that this is in a perpendicular Jugendstil. So I'm starting to get the signs, okay? And in some of the places, what you can find that those buildings are not necessarily in Old Town. In Old Town, so they are also in outside the outside center. So this you can have a Jugendstil building also in wood, and you also see that verticality. Oh, which way? Oh, yes. Okay, so this is one thing. The other thing is when I'm walking sometimes in a little bit outside Riga. So what I find very fascinating that typically you sort of decorate the facades of the building that are facing streets, but there are in Riga even the buildings in the backyard that you don't see from the street, and they don't have just the flat facades. So they may also have jūgendstila ornaments on it. So which is very nice, and that is also telling about the richness of the of people at that time. So, and then the last formal trend in Art Nouveau architecture, it's national romanticism. So it's roughly about 1905, 1906 until 1911, and for this style, what is very characteristic that the architects are trying to use a lot of natural building materials. So you would see a lot of wood and constructive elements like here, and you would see there are still these protruding bands, like in a vertical. No, perpendicular Jugendstyle, but the use of the materials is different, and the form and shape is different. So I like this building very much, and since so many of you have been to Riga, you know, of course, what is Staboraks as well, right? So do you know what's relation Staboraks with Staboraks in this building, Ķēniņš Commercial School in Riga on Tērbatas? So the stone, the facade, that comes from Staboraks. So next time when you visit Riga, I think that's another curious, interesting fact. But this is the stone comes from the cliff that is right now under the water because of the hydropower plant. Deep in the middle of river, deep in the water. So, but this is use of the materials. The other thing, of course, those buildings tend to be fairly massive. Sort of as imagined like in the old time Latvian, imagine like castles, how we were building at the times when before Christianization and the knights coming in. So very steep roofs, high roofs, like windows with slated tops of windows. That is somehow reflecting also the architectural form of the Latvian barn, especially in the Kurland side, and that is also the same characteristic applies actually to sacral buildings as well. So like a church on Jēzus baznīcas iela, which is also way out of downtown. So Tirzniecības centrs Alpha, if you know, that's closer there. So that's how the national romanticism looks like. Okay, another example. And of course, there is a lot less decoration, a lot less of ornamentation, so it's more subdued, and we are using also then more of the some of the ethnographic elements probably on the bands and on the facades. But still, you have the idea of how national romanticism looks like in architecture facades there. So then I'm concluding then with the summarizing up. It is that Riga is on the UNESCO World Heritage List because of quality and quantity of architecture, which is unparalleled anywhere in the world. So what was special about Riga? Because typically you have this eclectical Jugendstyle all over the place, and then of course the other cities probably did not develop at the same during the heyday of this architectural style. The cities did not develop at the same extent as Riga. So when Riga was being built up, so 40% of buildings were built in the Jugendstyle. So this, let's say, the saturation of the city landscape was fairly noticeable in that sense. The other thing is we have developed very, let's say, three now, or let's say two additional sub-trends of the architecture, which is perpendicular and national romanticism, and which is very well represented. So you would have at least, let's say, 250, 300 buildings in each of the styles, and the oh yeah, that's written actually there. So I was thinking, what? Okay, and you see the number of buildings that have been built in 10 years in Riga. So most of that owned by Latvians, and most of the, of course, the dwellers in those buildings, of course, were Latvians who inhabited Riga at that time. Why you can have so many, let's say, so well-developed national romanticism style? Because it was because of the locally trained architects who studied the architecture in the faculty. That was since 1869 there, and majority of those buildings were built by the Latvian architects. For instance, I guess Konstants Pēkšēns, Ežens Laube, they combined have like 400 buildings, just two of them. So that is, and of course the role of the credit unions. And yeah, the thing that I mentioned already to you is that we have architecture, we don't have too much of the other sort of expressions of Jugendstil. Okay, thank you very much. I'm ready to answer some questions, and I apologize for those who have a formal artistic or education in architecture. I guess you suffered a lot during my presentation. But as one of my colleagues said, you know, the diplomats are professional amateurs. You know, you know nothing in any of the field. You just pretend that you know something in some of the. So this was my shot at that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So since we're using the flying metaphor and we ended exactly at the time we should have, it shows that ambassadors can be airline pilots? I don't know.
Can be?
Can be pilots, right on time.
No, it's the ambassadors don't fly alone, so they always have a assistant or co-pilot or something. So if you have a good co-pilot, even ambassador can fly.
Thank you so much. Now we'll take some questions. So please think about what you'd like to know from Ambassador Ozoliņš. We'll take the first one from Imants, but I have a question to ask right off the bat. So what inspired your passion for this art and architecture?
Well, it's a couple of very simple things. I think I simply like Riga. When I walk in Riga, you know, when I live in Riga, I always try to find as many ways and paths, you know, to walk through Riga and to see the new buildings. So Riga is beautiful. We don't have a flat facades, and it's a fantastic place to visit and see. The other thing, of course, this is my job, to present my country, and Jugendstil is one of the ways how I can present it. And the third thing, of course, is good. Let's say my good predecessors, and as I mentioned already, my first boss, my first ambassador was a professional architect by training. So it's fairly easily for me was to continue, let's say, his example, and you will see inside and outside the exhibition. So that exhibition is made especially for you in 2010 in Prague, and has been like in 5 countries, I guess, at least 20 exhibitions I have had. Well, this presentation was a little bit more extended, so my apologies. It's still not translated from Danish, so the text is in Danish. But if you know the Riga, let's say, planning, you know, this is, let's say, Riga Old Town by 1940, and the red dots is basically Jugendstil architecture buildings. Yeah, so that would be my answer.
Thank you so much. Imants.
I have a question regarding the influence of Bauhaus to Jugendstil. Would that...
The other way around.
Yeah, that'd be totally, you know, opposite, wouldn't it? for some reason, as you said, the facade doesn't, of Jugendstil's facade doesn't really connect with the rest of the building. Is it the utility, you know, of the building that is sort of being influenced by maybe by the expense of or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so I haven't made myself clear enough. So what I said was that at the very beginning, one of the first formal sub-trend, which is eclectical, so that built the ornaments on the old buildings. What concerns the vertical or perpendicular Jugendstil and national romanticism, this is where you can see already that the interior layout and the spatial composition is very much connected to the facade. You won't see the bands of the rhythmically placed windows, and they may look really different at different levels. This is one thing. The second thing, well, this is not probably the building, but yeah. You see, for instance, on this building. So this is not exactly aligned. The windows are not aligned. So this is when the facade is connected with the spatial outline of the building. So in that sense, this is what makes this style as a modernist style. So it's new style where utility and function of the building really translates into facade as well. The other thing is Bauhaus is only 20s and 30s in Germany. When you go out, I checked when I came in, so Ivars, thank you very much for putting up these posters here. One poster, which is supposed to be the last one in the exhibition when they're sort of put on the wall, it's a building built in 1912. And this is very much functionalist building in Riga, 10 years ahead of Bauhaus. So, but the idea is that Jugendstil as such is the transition from historical architecture to the modernism. And the best expression, of course, of modernism is functionalism, Bauhaus, and things like that. And the architects that were sort of working in Riga, they were a little bit probably ahead of their time, because the building on that side of the wall, you know, I guess the last picture, this is a very good example of what will come in 10 years from now.
Would you say that the building on Jāņa Asariel, would that be a Bauhaus? There's I forgot the architect's name, but it's quite well known, as a matter of fact.
Yes, there are some wooden buildings that might qualify as a Jugendstil, but I know that the building across Sarkanais Krusts slimnīca, that is Bauhaus functionalism, yes, but that's 30s. That's not Jugendstil.
Yeah. Thank you so much. No. Thank you. Any more questions? Andy, we have one back there. While you go back there, I do have a question. I don't know if ambassadors are allowed to reply to this question, but which is your favorite Art Nouveau Jugendstil building?
I must admit, this summer, Torontonian asked me, you know, which is your secret place that no one else knows? And then I was like, it's really difficult for me to tell. And then I was like walking in the last months, you know, during vacation, and that was Kārlis Vasarais who asked me that question. Could you reveal me your secrets? And I was thinking, okay, no, he's going to the concert, so probably I'll point him to some of the places, you know, that are well preserved on, was it Laboratory Seal, 19th century, but that's not Jugendstil. So I don't have one building. I love Riga as it is, because it's entire, so it's really beautiful. You can walk the streets and you can have a wooden building, you can have a Jugendstil, you can have a functionalism. And in that sense, I think what I like one street is Stabuiela. If you walk from the railway, from that part. So it's developing and opening, and it's very nice. So you have a functionalism at the end. You have a Ministry of Economy and the Canadian Embassy on the left-hand side. and those are Jugendstil buildings, and you have a functionalism as well. So it's I mean, I like that street, but there is no one building. You know, I like every building that is renovated, that is very nicely profiled. Even those buildings that are in Grīziņkalns in a yard that you don't see from the street. You have to go in and sort of see that even there, in Grīziņkalns, facades can be decorated.
Thank you. We'll take one more question, but please, I guess we'll take two quick questions, and then if you have any questions also for Professor Liepa, we'll have him come up, but please keep the questions brief because we're coming to the end of the program. Andre.
Okay, I have one comment to add to your collection of stories about Jūgendstila. The first time I got a chance to go visit all of the Albertiel and Elisabethsel, and I came home and I was telling my Tante Via about this. Tante Via spent her teenage years in Riga, and she got this little sly smile on her face and said, "Oh no, I know, all of us teenagers loved Albertiel and Elisabethsel." And we thought, this is interesting. Why are all the teenagers into architecture? Oh no, this was cruising street. This is where groups of young girls went walking along the street, Albertiel, to check out groups of young guys who were also walking along Albertiel. And it completely changed my perspective of Jūgendstila on Albertiel.
Okay.
Thank you. Michael Wood, please.
I was wondering what you think about the impression I had when I saw the ornate house on Elisabethsel. It struck me, reminded me a bit about the Baroque style of fantastic decorations, lots of round figures, and as a reaction to the classicism that went before it. Do you agree somewhat with that sentiment, that maybe the Jugendstil is a reaction to the formalism of the neo-Gothic style?
Yeah, well, this is why it's called eclectical. You can put many things together. You can put some from Romantic, Gothic style, Baroque, Rococo, whatever. You know. And this is why it is a little bit a transition period from the old historical styles to the new ones. So in that sense, yes. So the eclectical Jugendstil sub-trend, this is why it's called eclectical. So there can be anything, you know, on it. But the basically, yeah. So what changed? It's only the decoration, the ornaments on the house themselves, and then it's later. So why we are so proud, you know, because we sort of built with by Latvian, let's say, architects, the separate sub-trends of the Jugendstil that evolved later into the Bauhaus and with the building built in 1912. But yes, you are right. You are right.
Thank
and
you.
they are Baroque is expressive, and eclectical Jugendstil is very, very expressive as well. So.
Thank you so much. Professor Liepa, if you could come up as well. I have to say that when he was going to present about the Nobel Prize winners, Latvian, someone actually thought that, well, you could be, that Professor Liepa is a Nobel Prize laureate. So he's actually with developing the program. Mm-hmm. So we have an ambassador, and anyways, thank you so much. Would anybody have some questions for Professor Liepa? I have one quickie. What is your dream for the foundation or that program?
Thank you. Well, my dream is, first of all, that in Latvia, not only high school education is mandatory for everyone, but also university education is mandatory for all families, for all kids. And even for those who cannot dream at the moment because of their economic position, they can afford, largely because of the University of Latvia Foundation scholarships. And then, of course, more we have young, talented, bright children in our university, higher is the likelihood that we will have academic excellence, scientific excellence, and who knows, as we have this ambitious plan by 2050, we will have Nobel laureates in Riga. I'm personally sure about it. And this is just one of the potential sort of dream plans. There can be others. Just a slight correction, I'm not a professor. I'm lecturing on legal ethics, and I do it weekly but my heart belongs to my legal practice. So I'm a practitioner rather than academician. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there a particular field that is advanced?
Thank you. Absolutely. I could here talk more, but there are more competent people to talk. I'm impressed by another board member of the University of Latvia Foundation, professor and former rector of the university, Professor Mārcis Ozoliņš, who is in physics. So he is well known. He has some years he had worked also in top global universities. I believe it was Princeton. So he certainly is in that network of top-level scientists. And he would definitely outline, now I'm trying to impersonate Professor Ozoliņš, but he would outline neuroscience and cyber computing. These are at least two areas that I know very well, have people of outstanding capabilities, and they already are working at the top level globally. So I think those two would be the most promising areas.
Thank you so much. It's got one to add.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Quantum computing, to be more precise. But again, it just shows that I'm in law, not in mathematics or IT.
Thank you very much to both of you.
Yes, no, I was very proud about it because I guess we have one professor in Riga who has done 10% of the world's algorithms for quantum computers.
Thank you so much.
And what is my, okay, I have mine on, thank you. So I understand that this is over, more or less, if it is?
Yes, we'd like to thank
I'm taking
both
over
of
now.
you.
I'm taking over.
Yes.
So what's my next ask is probably we can have a 10-minute video running in the background on Jūgendstila, and we can have it probably on the loop, you know, so that there's nicer background as well. So it can be without too much of a noise, but yes, thank you very much.
That's allowed. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for being a great audience. Thank you so much, Laudas Liepa and Ambassador Ozoliņš.
Yes.
So you are welcome to stick around and watch the video. Otherwise, we'll see you next week for Egils Rozenbergs and the choir Rota for our celebration of Latvian Independence Day. Paldies, uz redzīt nākamnedēļ, and please sign up for lunch.